whether they win the Conference League or not, and I think it'll be a massive failure if they don't. They'll be judged, and Enzo Maresca will be judged on if they get Champions League football.
Sometimes because Maresca's football can be very controlled, very safe, fans don't necessarily like it. But what we saw against Liverpool is how it can actually be thrilling when the hand breaks off a little bit and when Cole Palmer sparkles, and he absolutely did that in this game.
I thought it was an exceptional performance from Cole Palmer. So did Arne Slot, and I think it will serve Chelsea well in the run-in that he's produced that kind of performance just when it's most needed.
There was a flurry of missed chances by Liverpool in the second half. In particular, Darwin Núñez should have scored.
It does feel like it's getting towards the end of the road with him. But I think Liverpool, for the ambitions they have, they will feel they need a more reliable centre-forward.
I think we were all baffled when the team sheet came in and Mikel Arteta went with such a strong lineup in contrast to PSG, who made, 10 changes?
That's a bit of a nightmare, really. Saka starting blew my mind.
To name such a strong team and lose, I think is a double own goal.
If you win, you've exerted yourself to such a level that you may well have sapped some energy and you've put players at the risk of injury. If you lose, you've made everybody lose morale. So either way, there's not much of a victory there for you.
It certainly hasn't given the supporters any great belief they can go to PSG and turn that semi-final around, and maybe hasn't given the dressing room much belief either. First goal's massive in this game. If Arsenal get it, PSG get nervous. If PSG score, I don't think Arsenal come back.
It's Premier League All Access with me, Sam Matterface, Alex Crook, the talkSPORT chief football correspondent, and European expert Kevin Hatchard. Congratulations, Kevin. Are you still basking in the glory? Should we give Kev a guard of honour, Crook? of doing that as a Liverpool fan as he comes onto the podcast?
I contributed absolutely nothing to Liverpool's success, so I surely don't deserve that kind of guard of honour.
I'm sure you showed some support. You bought some merchandise. That all contributes.
That's definitely true.
In fairness, before this weekend, you started as many games as Endo.
Oi, I'll have no Endo slander on this podcast. Thank you very much. That's where I draw the line. You know that.
He was incredibly popular at Stuttgart. He's like a Stuttgart god, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean, what we saw with him at Stuttgart was his ability to lead, his ability to keep them up. He scored a goal right at the end of one season to keep them up, and they were really, really upset to lose him, but I think a little bit proud as well that he'd been picked up by such a big club. And Liverpool fans, I think, have really taken to him as well. He's got his limits, but he's a bit of a warrior.
Lots to talk about on the pod today, including a preview of the Arsenal-PSG second leg in the semi-final. We'll talk about Bodø Glimt and Tottenham Hotspur and Manchester United and Athletic Bilbao. We might even mention Your Gordon and Chelsea, which is the second leg of the semi-final of the Conference League. But let's start off with the weekend. It was a busy weekend of footballing action, some disappointing performances from Arsenal in particular. And the champions didn't win for only the third time. Who was it they lost to again? Yes, Kev, we will take it. We will take it. We need all the points that we can get. Maybe I am going to be proved wrong about Chelsea finishing in the top five, and maybe they will end up getting over the line because I thought they did really well yesterday, actually played well. Cole Palmer got his goal as well at the end from the penalty spot, which was really important for them. And I just want to sort of pare back a little bit on this sort of constant, non-stop commentary of whether someone's had a good or a bad season after every single game. Listen, I know we're in the business of sort of passing comment on everything that happens in football. That's what we do. But shall we just wait a little bit and decide whether or not Enzo Maresca has had a good season? Whether he gets into the Champions League or not should be the deciding factor, Kev, for me.
Yeah, I think the problem you've got when judging Maresca is that if you look at the nature of the club, you know this, for a couple of decades, it's been boom and bust, right? There's been this culture of as soon as a manager isn't on it, as soon as he isn't delivering what he's expected to deliver, he's out of the door. Now, Clear Lake and Todd Boehly came in and you wondered, okay, is this going to be a different approach? They're signing all these kids. Is it going to be a project thing? And actually, there have been lots of different managers through the door still. So that lack of patience is still kind of really in the fabric of that club. So therefore, by nature, when Chelsea have a dip, as they have done after a very, very promising start to the season, there's going to be criticism. And I think sometimes because Maresca's football can be very controlled, very safe, fans don't necessarily like it. But what we saw against Liverpool is how it can actually be thrilling when the hand breaks off a little bit and when Cole Palmer sparkles, and he absolutely did that in this game.
What we saw against Liverpool was a team that defended a lot deeper, but not out of design. And then when we spoke to him afterwards, and I spoke to him after you'd had a chat with him, Crook, and he was saying, well, I didn't design it like that. I didn't want them to play deeper. We just had to because Liverpool were pushing us back. And that gave them the room to counter-attack, and they looked more exciting in that dimension.
Yeah, they did, particularly using the pace of Pedro Neto. And I thought the first goal was really well crafted, a move that started with Cole Palmer in midfield. And obviously, in the end, it was Neto's cross that was swept in by Enzo Fernandez. I think they won the midfield battle, and I think we saw the value of Liverpool's first choice midfield by their absence at Stamford Bridge. Lavia was exceptional, obviously was being taunted by the Liverpool fans with chances you could have joined the champions, but arguably his best game in a Chelsea shirt. Caicedo played at right back, but did a decent enough job there and did well when he came into midfield as well. And despite what some of our newspaper colleagues are saying this morning, I thought it was an exceptional performance from Cole Palmer. So did Arne Slot. When I spoke to him afterwards, he said Liverpool dominated the game. The difference was a special, in his words, Cole Palmer, and I think it will serve Chelsea well in the run-in that he's produced that kind of performance just when it's most needed.
That said, there was a flurry of missed chances by Liverpool in the second half. In particular, Darwin Núñez should have scored, Kev.
Yeah, the header was alarmingly wide, and I do think even for his strongest supporter, it does feel like it's getting towards the end of the road with him. And that's a shame, I think. But I think Liverpool, for the ambitions they have, for what they want to do, not just in Europe, but in the Premier League as well, I think they will feel that, even though he's had a lot of game time, actually, they will feel they need a more reliable centre-forwards. And even though I really wanted it to work, and to some extent it has, I just can't see him being a Liverpool player at the start of next season.
Yeah, he was closer to scoring at Craven Cottage than he was at Stamford Bridge, to be fair, with that header. Arne Slot was quite interesting afterwards. He came into the press conference and he sort of talked about Chelsea, and he said, when we played them at Anfield, they were so close to us and they were so good. I thought, this team are going to give us real problems this season. And then he went on to say he expects them to challenge for the title next year and all these great platitudes. But one of the sort of almost damning bits of criticism, I think, was that he said, I didn't see this coming. And he was talking about Chelsea's second half of the season. Is the only way to sort of patch that up to finish in the top 5 and win the Conference League?
They're going to win the Conference League. Ultimately, they will be judged on if they finish in the top 5 or not.
You said that about Aston Villa.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that, actually. I think in a one-off game against Betis or Fiorentina, Chelsea would be favourites. But if you look at the way they've gone through the Conference League all the way, the gap's massive. In that final against Betis or Fiorentina, it's here. It's a lot narrower. So they might and they should, but I wonder about that final. I really.
He's already having a go at me for being a pessimist. He said your problem with you is you're just so downbeat, and it's true, right? Okay, it's true. It's true. I've spent most of the season saying I'm only going to be happy if they get in the Champions League and they win the Conference League, and I've spent the last couple of weeks saying I don't expect them to get into the top 5, and I'm not going to change my mind saying now, I think they're going to get into the top 5 because they've still got 2 very incredibly hard fixtures to play. Next week, live on talkSPORT, they go to Newcastle United. That's almost like a little bit of a mini playoff. They then play Nottingham Forest on the final day of the season. In between time, they're playing Manchester United, which, you don't know which way that's going to go.
I think you do. It's the 2 games either side of that United game, absolutely crucial. And I think the first one, arguably the biggest, Newcastle weren't at their best on Sunday, but still rescued a point. It keeps destiny in their own hands in terms of the top 5. And St James's Park is a tough place to go. So I think if Chelsea can come away from there with a positive result, even you might have to start to believe a top 5 finish is possible. But ultimately, whether they win the Conference League or not, and I think it'll be a massive failure if they don't, they'll be judged, and Enzo Maresca will be judged on if they get Champions League football. The Conference League is a nice bonus, but you can't base whether your season has been a success or not around that competition.
No. Well, let's just hope they do get to the Champions League, because Champions League football at Stamford Bridge is always a special occasion. Big special occasion coming up for Arsenal. They didn't prepare for it particularly well. They lost to Bournemouth. Did you know, Kev, they've dropped 21 points from being 1-0 up in the Premier League this season, Arsenal? How has that happened?
Yeah, that is a big concern, actually, because that suggests... Well, it's 2 things, actually. The first thing is game management, which surprises me for a team that's so well set up without the ball. You would think they'd be able to actually be really good at that, to actually see that kind of thing through. But the other thing that suggests that they don't score enough goals. That's the truth of it. They don't have somebody who is going to put away those chances to make it 2-0 or 3-0 and put that game away. I think they've had a strange couple of months because they were excellent against Real Madrid. Absolutely. And I know we're going to talk about the Paris game in a bit, but I just... That I've gone through the season backing up Kai Havertz and saying, well, look, he wants a centre forward to play in a certain way. And I still think that's true. But without Havertz in that team, they've really, really missed him. Now, there's a couple of things there as well. He does score goals, even though people will make out that he never does, but he does score goals. But also the work he does without the ball and the link-up play and all of that stuff. And they've really, really missed that. So I think whether they spend a huge amount of money on a centre forward or not, those forward options need to improve because Gabriel Jesus, I feel so sorry for him with all the bad luck he's had with injuries, but he cannot be relied upon. That's not his fault, but that's just the way it is. So they are going to have forward options they trust going forward, I think.
And I think crucially in this game against PSG, which is going to be live on talkSPORT on Wednesday night, is that the midfield battle is going to be the focus of everybody's attention because I thought PSG was so sharp and dynamic. They set the tempo. They found it very easy to play around Arsenal just because they played at such a speed that Arsenal couldn't get anywhere near them in that first leg. The return of Partey, and that precipitates a move forward for Declan Rice, which allows him to get closer up into that area which is occupied by Vitinha, I think is going to be absolutely crucial because if they don't win that battle, Arsenal, it doesn't matter who they've got playing up front, they're not going to get enough chances. And at the moment, they need quite a few chances because they miss a lot of opportunities.
Yeah, and I think they need Declan Rice at his absolute best because Martin Odegaard, as we discussed last week, is way off it at this moment in time. And I think we saw that again on Saturday. We haven't mentioned the team selection. I think we were all baffled when the team sheet came in and Mikel Arteta went with such a strong lineup in contrast to PSG who made 10 changes. I know they've wrapped up the title, but Arsenal really are only playing for second place. They're not going to drop out of the top 5 realistically. They need 4 points to be guaranteed that. Probably 2 will do it. To name such a strong team and lose, I think is a double own goal in many ways because it certainly hasn't given the supporters any great belief they can go to PSG and turn that semi-final around, and maybe hasn't given the dressing room much belief either.
That was interesting because I sent you a text as soon as the team news came out and I thought everyone was going to pile in and no one bit. And I thought, come on, seriously, this is far too strong for this game. And the reason I think that, Kev, is because if you win, you've exerted yourself to such a level that you may well have sapped some energy and you've put players at the risk of injury. If you lose, you've made everybody lose morale. So either way, there's not much of a victory there for you. Why would you do it? Can you explain it?
Well, his explanation seemed to be that he wanted momentum. He wanted a morale-boosting win with that team and then could go to Paris off the back of a good win against a good side, and then that would carry them through. But it didn't work because A, they lost the game, and B, they played against a Bournemouth team that works you. Whatever happens, win, lose or draw, Bournemouth make you work because they press high. They're really, really physical. We know that in terms of the way they approach it. That's a bit of a nightmare, really. Saka starting blew my mind. I could not understand why your most important player, attack-wise, you wouldn't wrap in cotton wool. So I thought that was crazy. So, yeah, a real surprise. They lost the game. There's an irony there that they got done on 2 set pieces, which is usually what they do to other teams. and it's what they're going to hope to do on Wednesday because the point you make about Declan Rice, I think, is really salient because if you look at that first leg, the biggest chance they made was the Trossard chance, really. Where does that come from? It comes from Declan Rice racing through midfield and they couldn't live with him. They couldn't get near to him and then he finds Trossard in space. That wasn't happening enough because Partey wasn't in the team. I do think that will change now because he's got the chance to race forward. Paris aren't perfect. They're very, very good. They are exceptional going forward. That midfield is right up there with the best in Europe. But you can get at them. But to do that, you have to have that drive in midfield. And you also have to win set pieces from an Arsenal point of view. Because for me, Paris's biggest weakness, Donnarumma's biggest weakness, is set plays, corners, free kicks, because Arsenal last week, first contact every time was an Arsenal player. First header, first touch. Paris were finding it really difficult to defend those set plays.
And it is worth pointing out that Liverpool have already been there and won this season. And Kev's right, they aren't perfect PSG, and they occasionally can be vulnerable. I mean, they didn't play particularly well at the weekend, but like we said, 10 changes in that game. That's an explanation for that. But Arsenal have got a real chance. And what I said at the beginning of the programme about the commentary about whether someone's had a good season or a bad season really does depend on the results of the overall season. Because if Arsenal, we stop it right now, Arsenal haven't won anything and they are second in the league and they're not playing particularly well in the Premier League. However, if they finish the season lifting the Champions League, nothing else matters. Nothing else matters. We will never remember this conversation about Declan Rice having to play deeper or somebody playing right back who shouldn't be playing right back, or why did they pick Saka for this game? All anyone will care about is the fact that Arsenal have finally lifted the Champions League. And I think actually that should be the measure of success or failure.
Yeah, and it will be. And obviously I was at the game for talkSPORT last week when Barcola misses a big chance to make it 2-0. I did wonder out loud, will they live to regret that? You know, because I think 2-0, Arsenal don't come back. 1-0, it's on a knife edge. I think it's all about the start. You know, the Arsenal fans have got a lot of criticism for maybe not giving their full backing last week. Very difficult. You know, the crowd were up before the game. They score after 4 minutes, PSG. They dominate the first half an hour and they absolutely take the air out of the lungs of the Arsenal fans. Arsenal have got to try and do similar in Paris because we know the atmosphere with the ultras is going to be red hot there. They need to impose themselves early on. First goal is massive in this game. If Arsenal get it, PSG get nervous, and we know that Arsenal have the ability away from home to sit deep and hit on the counter. If PSG score, I don't think Arsenal come back.
And talking of the fans, there's so much nervousness and tension amongst the fans, and that sort of permeates into the crowd, and that sometimes means that there is less noise than maybe there has been before because the anticipation is so great. I went to Aston Villa on Saturday, and John McGinn was talking about this afterwards. He was saying it felt tense in the stadium because everybody's been bruised by what's happened over the last couple of weeks, where they've dropped points, been kicked out of competitions, had bad performances, and now know that literally their season rests on getting into the Champions League. So everybody feels the tension. They got 1-0 up. They held on to it. They didn't necessarily sparkle on Saturday. So everyone felt a little bit nervy and there was anxiety in the air. And I'm sure that'll be the case when the Paris Saint-Germain game starts. It is only 1-0. Crook's right to point that out because it could have been a lot worse at the Emirates Stadium. It isn't, and they've got something to attack. It's live on talkSPORT on Wednesday night. Let's get to the G-Tech. Well, it was a real goal fest at the G-Tech Community Stadium. The goal scoring starting right from the very off. Mason Mount, both of his goals for Manchester United have come at Brentford. And actually, both of them have come where he sort of put them into a really good position and then they've been hit by a sucker punch. I think the last one that he scored was a late equaliser and he thought he'd done it. And then Brentford went up the other end and won or equalised. Either way, it was a sucker punch that came their way. But overall, Manchester United, again, a little bit sloppy at the back.
Yeah, but to be expected. You know, unlike Mikel Arteta, it was a fringe United side, rightly so. I'd have been happy if the under-16s had gone out of the G-Tech.
Most of them did.
Well, it was Manchester United's youngest ever starting 11 in the Premier League. So actually, to only lose 4-3, I got a bit of stick for this when I said it on the Sunday session. I don't think that's a terrible result. And I'll take the positives. Mason Mount has scored. Brilliant goal from Garnacho. Ahmad comes off the bench and gets a confidence-boosting goal to prove that he can play a part in the end of season running and that quest to win the Europa League. Defensively, they were a shambles. But obviously they had, a youngster at the back in Fredrickson who seemed to have a tough afternoon. I came away with more positives than negatives. Obviously, it's another L in the defeat column. Every chance they finish 16th or 17th, which is not great. But again, who cares if they win the Europa League? That's all we're going to remember.
He honestly doesn't care. Like, literally, I've never sat next to someone who cared less about a Premier League game than yesterday. He was like, I don't care about the result. I don't care what happens. All I care about is Thursday night. And I understand that. But I do also think that this happened with sort of Liverpool, really. They won the title with 4 games to spare. You've got both Tottenham and Manchester United not really concerned about the Premier League. Arsenal arguably could be in the same position, but actually put a decent team out on Saturday night. With all of the games that they've got between now and the end of the campaign, the Premier League table, the final Premier League table, is going to be heavily influenced by some of those matches and those results. Not necessarily sure that's a good thing, Kev.
No, I think that's fair. And I think you've got, it's such an unusual season, right? Because Tottenham have sunk without trace in the league. Manchester United have as well. But all they care about is European competition. So that's kind of a weird scenario anyway. But I do think what it shouldn't take away from is just how competitive it's been outside of Liverpool down to about mid-table. I can't remember a season where you've had so many kind of, and I say this with hesitation, kind of mid-range teams, if you like, Fulham, Bournemouth, Brighton, teams like that, Brentford, who've really, really put together a good season and are really pushing for those European spots. So I think while it's true that Tottenham and United are stinking the place up, in the Premier League, but doing, well in the Europa League, actually, what a great week for Brentford. Went to Forest. I thought they were excellent. And I thought they made the most of the chances that came their way. Great week for Sharda. Who knew he was so good in the air? He's a really interesting one.
You can
Kevin
pat
Sharda.
yourself on the back if you want to. It's okay. This is Envision, this podcast.
No, I
Give yourself a
didn't.
little
No,
pat on the back.
Genuinely didn't. But this is the point, right? So we talk a lot about Mbeumo, rightly. We talk a lot about Wissa, rightly. He's a really interesting case, Kevin Sharda, because when Brentford spent the money on him, we'd seen him in the Bundesliga a fair bit, and we thought, right, he's mega quick. There's something there. There's definitely something there. But even his coach at the time at Freiburg, Christian Streich, was saying he's super raw. He's not really proven anything yet. And he was kind of trying to keep the expectation down. So I didn't know. I had a kind of question mark against him and thought, right, I like him as a player, really enjoy watching him. Is he going to be able to do it in the Premier League? The job Thomas Frank has done, the job he has done personally, terrific, because he's really delivered.
Coyote, the fullback as well, particularly impressive yesterday. He looks like he's going to be a bit of a player.
Yeah, because he's got that, again, a really raw talent, but he's got that energy, that physicality. He'll do some strange things sometimes on the ball, but I think if they can mould him, and this is what Thomas Frank is brilliant at, and he said it himself, he's a talent developer. You go all the way back to when he was with the Danish youth teams. He sees players. He knows how to improve them. If he gets any time to work with them, he will lift them 1, 2, 3, 4 levels. And he's done it time and time again. Coyote, I think, is absolutely the next project.
What does the future hold for Thomas Frank?
Well, I think he's one of the names that is on Tottenham's list, but there's a hefty release clause to get him out of the G-Tech. So I don't think he's at the top of that list. I think one day he'll probably go back to Denmark and manage the national team, but that's a long way into the future. I know he's got admirers at Manchester United. He was discussed last summer when they were looking at replacing Erik ten Hag. So I think the future is bright for Thomas Frank. But I think he'll make his own destiny. He'll decide when the time is right to leave the G-Tech. I think more pressing, what does the future hold for the likes of Johan Wissa and Bryan Mbeumo in particular, because there's a lot of interest in him. My understanding is that Brentford will want in excess of £50 million to sell him. Newcastle certainly are actively monitoring that situation. He was mentioned as a United target yesterday, although I think that's probably more agent talk than anything else. But the good thing about Brentford is even if he goes, there'll be another cab off the rank, and maybe it will be Kevin Sharda. Maybe he'll be the key man next season if Bryan Mbeumo is sold.
I wondered actually, how they get themselves into this situation, but it's pretty impressive where they're quite comfortable to sell the players. That's the model, really, isn't it? It's to bring the players in, develop them, make them part of the first team, let them shine in the Premier League, then sell them for a big profit. And actually, you wouldn't be surprised if Wissa and Mbeumo go in the summer and then they invest elsewhere. In fact, they signed a striker last summer who's never played for them because he got injured.
Oh, he got Thiago. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. And he could end up being a superstar himself next season. In fact, keep an eye out for him because I'm sure if Wissa and Mbeumo go, they will give him the opportunity. Let's move on to West Ham against Tottenham. Not a great game for either of those two teams. Ange Postecoglou obviously made a lot of changes ahead of the Bodo Glimt game. We'll get to that in just a second. But the West Ham fans are really upset with Graham Potter and the type of football they're playing, the results they're getting. And you can understand it, can't you, Kev?
Yeah, I can. They're disillusioned anyway because of what Julian Lopetegui served up, and Lopetegui, the more you hear about it and the more you speak to people, you realise that that plot had been lost for quite some time before he went. I still don't think the club handled it well at all. I don't think he was treated particularly well towards
They
the
should
end.
never have hired him in the first place.
Yes, absolutely. And, he has had a very mixed career. But anyway,
But
that's
just because it wasn't
probably
the right fit, right? It was
Yeah,
just
exactly.
never going to work. You can't go into a club where they're desperate for someone to replace David Moyes style football with someone who plays David Moyes style football,
exactly.
and then expect him to be different.
Yeah, and you had a situation where, there were different voices competing in terms of transfer policy, in terms of, power and all of that. So, difficult situation to go into. He didn't help himself. And as you say, never the right style of football, never the right fit. I think Potter needs time, genuinely. I think he's another manager who's in this situation where really he's looking to next season. There's nothing to play for, but you still have to show up. And against Tottenham, at least they got at least they came from behind to get the result. But there's players really struggling there. Max Kilman, I must admit, I got this totally wrong. I thought when he signed, okay, well, I've spent a fair bit of money, but I think that's a really good signing. I liked him very much at Wolves. I thought he was a good centre-back. I thought he was potentially a good leader. It's just not happened for him at all. I think
Yesterday was an aberration, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was his mistake that leads to the Tottenham goal. Todibo, I thought that was a real coup, and it hasn't really worked out for him necessarily. So, yeah, it's been a poor season, but the shining light really, and he scored again, Jared Bowen. You would always want a guy like that to turn out for your football club because he does genuinely care. He does genuinely, and I think he really got how important that Tottenham game is. We might not always understand it, but West Ham look at that calendar and go, Tottenham. They're the games they desperately want to win. Absolutely. So he understands how important that is.
And that was one of the things that I think caught Graham Potter out this week, because he said very silly things in the build-up to the game, which piled pressure on him. He suggested he wanted Tottenham to win the Europa League. Now, if you say that to a West Ham United fan, they're going to go off the scale. It's crazy. You just don't say that to a West Ham United supporter. And it's all right saying he's thinking about next season, Crook. But actually, the truth is that he has got to reward those West Ham fans that are coming week in, week out to the London Stadium, because when he walked in the door in January, there was not much to play for. Over the course of the season, it's got even less likely they're going to do anything good. But he's still got to somehow try and build a bond with the supporters. And he just hasn't done that. They haven't done that as a team. And I think there's a lot of disillusioned people who are now not going to be turning up week in, week out at the London Stadium and, sitting there thinking to themselves, where is this club going?
Well, it's something he struggled with throughout his career, that relationship with supporters. If you remember, there was a time when he turned on Brighton fans, said they needed a history lesson after they were booed off following a 0-0 draw with Leeds. It was only really during lockdown when there were no fans inside the stadium when he was able to impose his style of play on Brighton. They came out of lockdown in much better shape. Chelsea fans never took him to their hearts, and I think West Ham fans are struggling likewise. And it wasn't just the pro-Tottenham comments that he made. When he said to the reporters in that press conference, I don't care what you guys think, it didn't sit well with me. No, I don't care if he takes our opinion seriously or not. But when you are a manager and you're sat in front of the press conference, you aren't talking to the journalists, you're talking to your fan base. And he just looks to me, as he did at Chelsea throughout his tenure, that he's struggling to handle the pressure of being in charge of a big club. Because no disrespect to Brighton or Swansea or Östersund, West Ham are a bigger club than all those three, and their fans have certain expectations.
It is scary, isn't it, Kevin, that the fact that he has... I mean, this is a nice bloke, and if you ever meet him, you can sit there and have a little chat with him. He's absolutely fine. But I do think he does suffer once the pressure comes on. And for someone who's got qualifications in emotional intelligence, I would have expected them to handle that a little bit better.
Yeah, I'd agree. And it's, relevant that Crookie mentions Östersund, because that's where he really built that reputation as being a guy that could build a bond with supporters, could really win his players over. They do, all kinds of strange things. He'd put them out of their comfort zone. He'd make them do like rock performances and things like that. He made them do a ballet recital of Swan Lake.
I was
going to
say, I'm
stage.
sure there was some sort of ballet thing where they all wore tutus.
That's right. So he would get them to do that kind of stuff. But when you're in Sweden with the club that was in the lower leagues and you've dragged them up, you have that authority because you've succeeded, right? And so you can say to these players, look, you might think this is nuts, but it's going to work, and I'm a proven success here. And you saw the results he had in Europe with Östersund and all that stuff. Chelsea, though, you're never going to be able to do that with them. I think he was stitched up is too harsh, but I think he was set up to fail at Chelsea in terms of the way the squad was composed, all of the problems around there. But the same themes there are the same themes here. And you're absolutely right. When pressure is applied, he's finding it really difficult, A, to handle it, and B, to be authentic. You had that thing at Chelsea where he was swearing, and it was like listening to your parents swear. It was like really odd. It was like, what is this? And Kevin, it was really out of character.
We're all parents now. We're all
true. But maybe don't let them hear. But do you know what I mean? It's like that was strange. There was a thing recently when he was saying, "Oh, I don't want to talk about positives anymore," and it was all a bit handbags. It was all a bit odd. Yeah, it does feel like that. And it's like, look, we don't mind you being some nerdy professor. Just get on with it. But don't try and make out that you're something you're not. And I think that kind of sets people off as well. When you're not being your authentic self, that does put people on edge as well.
I can't get out of my head the thought of Jean-Claire Todibo, Nico Fulkrug and Jared Bowen in tutus doing Swan Lake.
Fulkrug doing Swan Lake would be quite the sight. That really would.
Oh, I think I'd love to see it. I think I might actually pay. I think I'm more likely to pay to go and watch that than I am to go and watch West Ham at the moment.
Yeah, that's a West End hit, I think. Absolutely.
Let's focus on Tottenham because they've got a big semi-final live on talkSPORT 2 on Thursday. They're 3-1 up against Bodø Glimt, but not taking it for granted because Bodø Glimt have won their last 5 European home games by 2 or more goals. It's a plastic pitch. It's 2 degrees. It's going to be freezing out there. Obviously, it's not really that cold. It's only 2 degrees, but it's going to be light at 10 o'clock at night because the sun doesn't go down till 11 at this time of the year. But it's a big game for Tottenham. But Crook, they're going to have to negotiate it without Lucas Bergvall, without James Maddison, whose injury seems to be quite significant, and they don't know whether they're going to get Dominic Solanke over the line yet.
And Son, the captain, be surprised if we see him again this season as well. So big players absent. I think the Maddison blow is a big one because I thought he was their best player last week, and it looked very innocuous when he was forced off with a knee injury. But I got the nod yesterday afternoon that actually this could be potentially quite serious. ACL was banded around. We've not got confirmation of that from Tottenham yet, and they're awaiting the results of a scan. But what we have been told is that the injury is significant enough that he won't play again this season and probably deep into next. So I feel really sorry for him because it's been a bit of a stop-start campaign. He's trying to get his way back into the England squad. And as I say, that was probably one of his best performances of the season, a real driving force. And that midfield makeup is a concern, isn't it, with no Lucas Bergvall as well. And how big a chance do you take with Dominic Solanke if he's got some kind of issue on that plastic pitch? So big decisions to be made and big players missing.
Just explain, Kev, the significance of Bodø Glimt. I mean, we're all au fait with it. I'm commentating on it for TV. Crook's doing it for talkSPORT 2 on Thursday. So we're very much across the story. But just try and sort of give us an example of Bodø Glimt and what they sort of represent, because they've come from nowhere to everywhere in a very short space of time.
Yeah, that's the key. I mean, this is a club on the edge of the Arctic Circle. This is a club that hadn't really had that success. And Kjetil Knutsen has done a phenomenal job. I mean, it's not just the fact that they've won league after league after league. I think he's won 4 Norwegian league titles now.
4 out of 5, yeah.
It's the style it's done with. It's the fact that they do things in a different way. They hired a former fighter pilot to talk to the players, and he came in and said, look, you might not like what I tell some of these players, because if they come to me and say, I'm thinking about leaving the club, and I think it'd be better for their mental health to leave the club, I'm going to tell them to leave the club. So if you want me to do this and want me to kind of really help them with the mentality and things like that, there might be things you don't like. And I'm also going to teach them that it's not even necessarily about the result of a game, the result of a season. It's about much more than that. And he's kind of taught them to compartmentalize and all that stuff. Now, that's all very well, but you need results. The results in Europe, phenomenal. They've beaten Roma. They've beaten Jose Mourinho's Roma 6-1 in a game. They've beaten Celtic, home and away. Who was in charge of Celtic? Ange Postecoglou. At the start of this season, just an unbelievable performance. They beat Porto.
Yeah, did the game. It was brilliant.
They had 10 men for a massive chunk of the game, you'll remember. And we were all thinking at the time when they went down to 10, well, this is where you kind of dig in and you try and close things down and make yourself competitive. No, just kept on attacking. And Porto couldn't deal with it. Could not deal with it at all.
It was unbelievable. Scott Minto and I were doing the game, right, honestly. And we were just blown away. We came away thinking it was one of the best games we ever watched.
Yeah,
it was brilliant. It was all about Samu Omorodion before the game. And afterwards, everyone was talking about Bodo Glimt.
Yeah, and that's what they do to you, because they, Vitor Bruno, who was the coach of Porto at the time, he'd taken it over from Sergio Conceição. He had been his assistant.
He wore shorts that night.
Yes, he did.
I don't think Angie's going to wear shorts.
No, absolutely not. But he just looked terrified because he was like, I can't process what they're doing to us. This is driving me crazy. And the most recent example was against Lazio in the quarters, because they won 2-0 in the first leg. It could have been, no word of a lie, it could have been 6. They absolutely destroyed them. And this is a team that's pushing for Europe in Italy. And they absolutely wiped the floor with them. And even when they got pegged back in Italy, still won on pens. They are a top team. The crowd are great. As you say, plastic pitch. It's an unusual scenario because of the daylight situation. This is not easy. This is absolutely not easy for Tottenham.
You're not filling Spurs fans with confidence. Lazio topped the league phase as well, didn't they, in the Europa League?
Yeah, they've been great, and they honestly destroyed them.
That was a heck of a scalp. And you talk about the Porto manager not knowing how to handle them. Tottenham controlled the game.
They did.
Until Bodo Glimt scored. And then you look down at Ange Postecoglou, and this is a criticism that Spurs fans have been labelling him all season. Suddenly, the visitors are in control of how the tempo of the game is being played, and he stands, arms folded, no reaction from the edge of the technical area. So you do wonder, if they get that early goal in Norway, does Ange Postecoglou have the capability to react to it? And actually, history tells us no, because he's already been there in a two-legged tie with Celtic and been absolutely battered.
Well, interestingly, he is someone who I think is going to be defined by this 90-minute football match, right? Whatever happens in this 90-minute football match is probably going to dictate whether or not he's remembered fondly or not. When we were walking out of the ground on Thursday, Crook and I were walking with two guys, never met them before, came up to us, wanted to talk about Tottenham. Archie and Ryan. They were absolutely shaking with fear about the possibility of going to Bodo Glimt and conceding the first goal. They just won the first leg of a semi-final of a European competition, 3-1. And all they were concerned about was what was going to happen in the second leg and were they going to concede the first goal, because that was going to be a disaster. And that's the mentality. That's what it's like in the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. That's what it's like amongst the fan base. Okay, there's one or two, and I met one of the girls that works in the office, Maya, massive Tottenham fan, couldn't believe that people were being so negative about the fact they conceded that goal. But it does put a seeded doubt in the back of the minds of the players and the supporters because of history. What has happened over the course of the season before? What has happened in the last 18 months under Ange Postecoglou? And that is why there is a concern. For my part, I think they will go there. I think they will do something that surprises everybody, and Tottenham will win. They'll go through to the final, and it will be very calm, and no one will be ruffled in any way. And that will be a massive surprise, by the way, if that happens, because that's not what Tottenham usually do.
But as a neutral, and as we're commentating the game, we want an early Bodo Glimt goal, don't we? We want some jeopardy in the air. Yes, we do. Come on.
I'm spending my week with Tottenham fans. Believe me, I just want it to be very serene.
But the thing that's really interesting, right, is Tottenham have the greater quality. There's no doubt about it. Man for man, Tottenham have the quality. fine. If you think of the mentality, and I've talked about all the work Bird of Glimt have done on mentality, and I'm sure Tottenham do that stuff. I'm sure every club
Not with a fighter pilot, they don't.
Not with a fighter
former
pilot.
Captain of the Norwegian Air Force.
Yeah. He was really, sorry to digress again, but it was really interesting because he said other clubs have tried to hire him and he didn't want to go. And they just did not understand because they said, do you know any other fighter pilots who do this stuff? And
do you know any other fighter pilots that do this stuff?
And he was just
he invented this thing called the Bodo Glimt ring, didn't he? It's where everybody gets into their little huddle just before the game. That you might have seen it just before the match.
They do it after a goal as well. Yeah.
So in the technical area.
In the technical area, they did it before the game. But when they conceded after 38 seconds, the players did it again. They got back together again and said, look, we got to make sure we hold on to this. Don't be stupid. I think they'll be okay with a 2-goal deficit.
Yes.
Kev thinks Tottenham are going to get beat. I can sense it.
Well,
you think Spurs are going out.
I think what's interesting...
Kev, could you imagine the phone-in on Friday morning?
Oh, I know. I think what's interesting is the psychology. Look, Tottenham are the better team. No, hang on. Tottenham have the better players. Not the better team. Tottenham have the better players.
He checked himself there.
Now, think of the psychology. Tottenham have everything to lose. Bird of Glimt have everything to gain. If Bird of Glimt go out to a Premier League team, their fans go, amazing season. This has been incredible.
The best ever.
We still love you as much as we ever did, if not more. So they can play. There's always the pressure of the occasion, but they can play with that support and with that belief. Tottenham, oh my God, if they concede the first goal, because they're looking at each other thinking, we could actually mess this up and not make the Europa League final, and the season is in ruins. Now, that is a big deal.
And they'll be looking for a new manager.
Well, yeah, but whatever. Well, that's probably happening anyway. But whatever happens in terms of the technical side of it, that mental side of it is the biggest test that Tottenham will face. Because if that first goal goes in, then it's panic stations.
I do feel a little bit of weight of responsibility as well going to do this game. And I'm sure you feel the same. Because only 404 Tottenham fans can go to this match. So it is up to you and me to give them a really good evening. Most of them are going to have to rely on us and our coverage. That is quite daunting.
Can't wait.
It's not your fault.
It doesn't go well.
If they lose 3-0, it's not your fault.
We'll definitely get blamed. There's no doubt about that. Oh, God, come on. I really want Tottenham to go through. I know that's a very Graham Potter thing to say, but I do. I want an all-English final. I want one extra place in the Champions League. I want them to do it, please.
Athletic Club Bird of Glimt. I have to fly the European flag if you two won't.
Well, you do that.
Well, never mind Tottenham fans being nervous. It's the psyche of a football fan. I'm petrified that United concede twice in the first 15 minutes.
After watching you defend on Sunday, I would be as well. Right, okay, that's it from us. We were supposed to mention Aston Villa 1, Fulham 0. We've done that. That was about as interesting as it was for most of the game. It wasn't great, but Aston Villa were in control for quite a lot of it.
Can I make one tiny point about that, Sam? Really, one tiny point. Unai Emery, even more crazy on the touchline than usual.
He needs the RAF pilot.
It felt really kind of pertinent.
Oh, he was losing
that win. Yeah,
I was sitting about 10 rows behind him, and I was concerned for his health.
Because he knows how important this is for the club.
Arms everywhere. It was emotional.
Because this sets the pathway for them, right? If they qualify for the Champions League again, that's enormous in terms of recruitment, in terms of money, all that stuff.
Absolutely. And I wish we had more time to go into it because I think that I think we'll probably concentrate more on that. I think after the midweek games, we had to talk about Arsenal, Tottenham, and Manchester United because of their midweek games. But Aston Villa next weekend and Chelsea and Newcastle next weekend, massive football matches. They're in a great position, by the way, Aston Villa, where they play Manchester United and Tottenham. They want Tottenham to go through as well, by the way, because they want to be in a situation where they're playing both Tottenham and Manchester United when they've got nothing else to play for.
Yeah.
Right, that's it from us. We'll be back on, we think probably Friday morning, but we haven't really decided how we're going to do it yet because it all depends on that Europa League thing. So we probably have to do it after those matches. So we'll be with you Friday to preview all the weekend's Premier League action. Crookmeister, thank you very much.
Enjoyed it as always.
You got your thermals for Bird of Glimt. And Kev Meister, enjoy another great weekend of European football. And we didn't give you a guard of honour on the way in, so We'll do it on the way out. Here we go.
Well, thank you very
Hatchard,
much.
Liverpool
and
fan
well done to Harry
champion
Kane as well.
of England.
Harry Kane finally won a trophy. Well done to him.
We like Harry Kane. We're delighted for him. He's a great servant of English football. Congratulations, Harry.